Hey, I'm Luke. I'm 22, living in a small apartment in San Diego, scraping by with part-time gigs at a hardware store and fixing cars on the side. It's not much, but it keeps the lights on. I'm the guy who'll stop to help you jumpstart your car or carry your groceries up the street without thinking twice. People say I'm too blunt sometimes, but I just call it being real. I don't like games, don't like pretending. If I say I'll do something, I do it. That's how I've always been. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when the sun feels like it's trying to cook you alive. I was headed to my buddy Josh's place, a small house a few blocks from mine, to hang out, maybe play some video games or grab a beer. Josh and I go way back. We've been friends since high school, back when we'd sneak into movies or race bikes down the boardwalk. His house was familiar, like a second home, with its faded blue paint and creaky front steps. I parked my beat-up Toyota pickup out front, grabbed my phone, and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder, figuring Josh was probably blasting music or sleeping through his alarm. Then the door opened, and it wasn't Josh. It was Sabrina, his mom. She stood there in a long, loose dress, the kind that flows like it's meant for the beach. Her dark hair was a little messy, like she'd been working on something. A rag hung over her shoulder, and her cheeks were flushed, probably from the heat. "Luke," she said, her voice soft but surprised. "Josh isn't here. He's at the gym." "Oh," I said, scratching the back of my neck. "Didn't know. I'll just come back later." I turned to go, but she stepped forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sabrina was 43. I knew that from Josh, but she didn't look it. Not in a trying too hard way, just naturally striking. Her eyes were warm but carried a quiet weight, like she'd seen more than she let on. I'd always thought she was beautiful, even when I was a kid, but I never let myself think too hard about it. She was Josh's mom, after all. "No, come in," she said, her voice a little hesitant. "It's too hot out there. You can wait if you want. Josh should be back soon." She stepped aside, holding the door. I nodded, feeling a little out of place, but not wanting to be rude. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and old wood. The living room was tidy, with a couch, a coffee table, and a few framed photos of Josh as a kid. Sabrina led me to the kitchen, gesturing to a chair. "I was just cleaning," she said, almost apologizing. "The upstairs window's stuck, and it's driving me crazy." I glanced at her, noticing the faint frustration in her voice. "Stuck how?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "Like won't open? Won't budge," she said, tossing the rag onto the table. "I've been at it for an hour. It's probably older than me." She smiled a small, tired smile, and I caught myself staring a second too long. I cleared my throat. "Want me to take a look?" I asked. "I'm pretty good with fixing stuff." It was true. I'd spent enough time tinkering with cars and tools at the hardware store to handle a stubborn window. She hesitated, then nodded. "If you don't mind, it's upstairs." I followed her, the stairs creaking under my sneakers. The hallway was narrow-lined with more photos: Josh at graduation, a younger Sabrina, with a man I knew was her ex-husband, long gone after their divorce. She led me to a small room, probably a guest bedroom, with a ladder propped against the wall and a window half covered in smudge cleaner. The frame looked warped, the kind of thing that happens when a house settles too long. "It's this one," she said, climbing onto a chair to reach the latch. Her dress swayed as she stretched, and I noticed how it caught the light, soft and thin. I shook my head, focusing, and climbed onto another chair beside her. "Let's push together," I said, gripping the frame. "On three, 1, 2. Before I could say three, a gust of wind roared through the open window downstairs, rattling the house. Sabrina's dress billowed up the fabric, catching the air like a seal. She gasped, grabbing at it, but the chair wobbled under her. "Oh no," she said, her voice sharp with panic, and she tipped backward. I lunged, dropping the window, and caught her around the waist. My foot slipped, and we both went down, crashing onto the hardwood floor in a tangle of limbs. I landed on my back, Sabrina half on top of me, her dress still twisted around her legs, one hem caught on my knee. Her hair fell across my face, smelling faintly of lavender, and her hands pressed against my chest as she tried to steady herself. My arms were still around her, and for a second, neither of us moved. Her face was inches from mine, her cheeks flushed bright red, her eyes wide with shock. I could feel her breath, quick and warm, and my heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. "I'm so sorry," I stammered. my voice cracking like I was 15 again. I didn't, God, I didn't mean to. I tried to shift to untangle us, but her dress was still caught, and every move felt awkward. Too close. She didn't say anything, just pushed herself up, her hands shaking slightly. Her face was still red, and she avoided my eyes, smoothing her dress with quick, nervous movements. "It's okay, Oeko," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was the wind." She stood brushing her hair back, and I scrambled to my feet, my face burning. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I wanted to bolt to pretend this hadn't happened, but her eyes flicked to mine just for a second, and there was something there, not anger, not embarrassment, but something softer, like she was seeing me for the first time. I opened my mouth to apologize again, but she cut me off. "Stay, Issy," she said, her voice steadier now. "It's hot out. I'll get you something cold." She turned toward the door, her dress swaying again, and I caught myself staring at the way it moved, the way she moved. I sat down on the chair, my hands gripping my knees, trying to calm the chaos in my head. My heart was still racing, not just from the fall, but from the way she looked at me, the way her hands had pressed against me, the way the moment had felt like something I couldn't explain. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. She was Josh's mom, older, out of my league, someone who'd always been a background figure in my life. But sitting there in that quiet house with the wind still rattling the windows, I couldn't shake the image of her eyes, her flushed cheeks, the weight of her against me. Something had started, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wasn't ready to walk away. I sat in the kitchen, my hands still gripping my knees, trying to shake off the image of Sabrina's dress tangled around my leg, her face inches from mine. The hardwood floor upstairs felt burned into my back like the moment had left a mark I couldn't see. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the AC and the occasional creak of the walls settling in the San Diego heat. I kept replaying it, her flushed cheeks, her quick breaths, the way her eyes had locked onto mine for that one endless second. I told myself to get a grip. She was Josh's mom. This wasn't supposed to happen. The door to the hallway opened and Sabrina walked back in wearing a different dress, now longer, darker, more modest, like she'd chosen it to avoid another incident. Her hair was still a little messy, but pulled back into a loose bun. She carried a tray with 2 glasses of iced water, condensation dripping down the sides. "Sorry about that," she said, setting the tray on the table. Her voice was light, but there was a slight catch in it, like she was trying to smooth over the awkwardness. "The wind's been wild today." "Yeah," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "No worries." I took a glass, the cold biting my palm, and drank too fast, hoping it'd cool the heat in my face. She sat across from me, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass, and for a moment we just sat there, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. I wanted to say something, anything to break it, but my brain was still stuck on the fall and how close we'd been. Sabrina looked up, catching my eye, and smiled, a small, real smile that made my chest tighten. "It's not the first time a man's seen under my dress," she said, her tone teasing but soft. "But it's been after a while since it made me blush." She laughed just a little and looked down at her glass like she was surprised she'd said it out loud. I froze my glass halfway to my mouth. My face burned, and I coughed, trying to play it off. I didn't mean to. God, I'm sorry," I stammered, feeling like an idiot. But her words hung there warm and unguarded, like she was letting me see a piece of her she usually kept hidden. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just nodded, taking another sip to cover the fact that my heart was racing again. She stood picking up her glass and headed toward the back door. "Come on," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "It's cooler in the yard." Then I followed her outside, the sun still blazing, but softened by the shade of a big oak tree. The backyard was small but neat, with a wooden bench, a few potted plants, and a string of fairy lights that probably looked nice at night. She sat on the bench, motioning for me to join her. I did, keeping a safe distance, my hands stuffed in my pockets. We sipped our water, the ice clinking, and talked about nothing. Josh's gym obsession, the heat wave, the neighbor's dog that never stopped barking. It was easy, almost too easy, like we were both trying to pretend the upstairs moment hadn't happened. But every time her eyes met mine, I felt it again, that pull like a current I didn't know how to swim against. Sabrina stood to head back inside, probably to get more water, when her glass slipped from her hand. It hit the ground, not breaking, but spilling water across the grass. "Oh, damn it," she muttered, crouching to pick it up. I knelt at the same time, grabbing a napkin from the tray to wipe the mess. Our heads were close, too close, and when she looked up, her face was inches from mine. Her breath caught her eyes, those warm, heavy eyes locked onto me. There was something different in them. Not embarrassment, but something deeper, like a question she wasn't sure she wanted to ask. I froze, the napkin crumpled in my hand. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. For a second, I thought she might say something, but she just straightened up, brushing her hands on her dress. "I'm a mess today," she said, laughing it off, but her voice was shaky. She stood smoothing her dress again, and I stood too, feeling like the air had gotten thicker. "Want to help me with some boxes in the garage?" she asked, her tone light again. "I was going to wait for Josh, but you're here." "Sure," I said, grateful for something to do, something to focus on besides her eyes. We walked to the garage, the heat hitting us like a wall as we stepped inside. It was cluttered, boxes of books, old furniture, a bike with a flat tire. Sabrina pointed to a stack of cardboard boxes labeled books. "Those need to go to the shelf in the corner," she said. "They're heavy, so don't overdo it." We got to work, hauling boxes across the garage. The heat was brutal, and sweat soaked through my shirt in minutes. I yanked it off, tossing it onto a chair, and kept moving. Sabrina was lifting a smaller box when she turned and froze, her eyes flicking over me. Bare chest, sweaty, probably looking like I'd just run a marathon. Her cheeks flushed just for a second, and she looked away, but not before I caught it. She didn't say anything, just kept working, but I could feel her glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking. We moved in silence for a bit, the only sounds our breathing and the scrape of boxes on the concrete floor. I tried to focus on the work, but my mind kept drifting to her, the way her dress moved when she bent down, the way her fingers brushed against the box, the way she didn't seem to mind the heat as much as I did. I was starting to think I was losing it, reading too much into every look, every moment. Then it happened again. Sabrina stepped over a box, her foot catching on a stray flap of cardboard. She stumbled, her arms flailing, and I dropped the box I was carrying to catch her. My hands landed on her hips, steadying her, and she gripped my arms to keep from falling. We stood there, her body pressed close, my fingers firm against the curve of her waist. Her dress was soft under my hands, and I could feel the warmth of her skin through it. She didn't pull away, just looked up at me, her eyes wide but not scared, searching like she was trying to figure out what this was. Neither of us spoke. The garage was stifling, the air thick with dust and heat, but all I could think about was how close she was, how her hands felt on my arms. Slowly she stepped back, her fingers sliding away, but her eyes stayed on mine for a long moment. "Come inside," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "It's too hot in here." I nodded, my throat tight, and followed her back to the house. My shirt was still in the garage, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding again, not from the heat, but from the way she looked at me, the way her words felt like they meant more than they should. We stepped into the kitchen, the cool air hitting my skin, and I stood there unsure what to do next, knowing only that something had shifted and there was no going back to the way things were before. The kitchen felt smaller than it had an hour ago, the air cooler but heavier, like it was holding its breath. I stood by the counter, still shirtless from the garage, my skin sticky with sweat despite the AC. Sabrina moved to the sink, filling a glass with water from a pitcher, her movements deliberate, like she was trying to keep things normal. I could still feel the ghost of her hips under my hands, the way her eyes had locked onto mine when I caught her in the garage. My pulse hadn't slowed since, and I wasn't sure it would. She handed me the glass, her fingers brushing mine for a split second. "Here," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You look like you need it." I took it, muttering a thanks, and drank. The cold water did nothing to quiet the noise in my head. I kept thinking about the fall upstairs, the moment in the garage, the way her dress had moved in the breeze. She was Josh's mom, for God's sake. I wasn't supposed to feel this way, but I did, and it was like trying to outrun a wave. Sabrina leaned against the counter, sipping her own water, her eyes flicking to me and then away. The silence stretched, not awkward but charged, like we both knew something was coming but weren't sure how to get there. Then out of nowhere, she set her glass down and looked at me, her gaze direct, almost piercing. "Do you find me attractive, Luke?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made my stomach drop. I froze the glass halfway to my mouth. My face burned, and I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. I wasn't ready for that, not for her to just lay it out like that. I stammered, setting the glass down too hard, water sloshing onto the counter. I mean, she didn't push, just watch me, her eyes soft but unyielding. I'm not fishing, she said, her voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. I just want to hear the truth from someone who's not pretending. She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the counter, and for the first time I saw a crack in her usual calm, a hint of the loneliness. She carried the kind you don't notice unless you're looking close. I swallowed, my throat tight. I could have dodged it, made a joke, changed the subject. But something about the way she looked, the way she'd asked, made me want to be honest, even if it scared me. I do, I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. I have, actually. The words felt like they'd been pulled out of me, raw and too real. I looked at her, waiting for her to laugh it off or shut me down, but she didn't. She exhaled a small, shaky breath and leaned back against the counter, her eyes fixed on the floor. Josh's dad never looked at me that way, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not even when I was 30. There was no self-pity in her tone, just a quiet truth, like she was letting me see a piece of her she'd kept locked away. I wanted to say something, to tell her she was wrong, that she was the kind of beautiful that didn't need anyone else's validation, but my words felt too small for the moment. I stepped closer, not thinking, just moving, and sat on the stool beside her. My hand reached out almost on its own and rested on hers. Her skin was warm, her fingers still beneath mine, and she didn't pull away. Our eyes met, and it was like the room shrank to just us. Her gaze was heavy, searching, like she was trying to figure out what this was, what we were. I didn't know either, but I couldn't look away. I shouldn't let you stay, she said, her voice soft but firm, like she was talking to herself as much as to me. She didn't move her hand, though, and neither did I. The air felt thicker, the silence louder. She stood, turned to the sink, and started washing her glass, her back to me. Her dress, still that darker, more modest one, rode up slightly as she leaned forward, and I caught myself looking, my eyes tracing the curve of her waist before I forced myself to look away. I wasn't supposed to notice these things, but I did, and it was like my brain was stuck on her. She turned, catching me mid-glance, and for a second I thought she'd call me out, but she didn't. Don't apologize, she said, her voice steady, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I saw the same thing in your eyes earlier. Her words hit like a spark, lighting something in me I hadn't realized was there. She wasn't angry, wasn't embarrassed. She was just seeing me the way I was seeing her. I stood, my heart pounding, not sure what to do with myself. The kitchen felt too small, too warm, like the walls were closing in. Sabrina set the glass down, dried her hands on a towel, and stepped closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell the faint lavender in her hair, the same scent from when we'd fallen upstairs. Nothing has to happen, Luke, she said, her voice low, her eyes locked on mine. But it already feels like something has. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She was right. Something had shifted, maybe when we fell, maybe in the garage, maybe right now. I didn't know what it was, but it wasn't nothing. It was heavy, real, like the weight of her hand under mine, like the way her eyes didn't waver. I wanted to say something, to tell her I didn't want to leave, that I didn't care, that she was Josh's mom or older or anything else, but the words wouldn't come, and all I could do was stand there, caught in the pull of her. She stepped back, breaking the moment, and grabbed the pitcher from the counter. More water, she asked, her tone lighter, like she was trying to pull us back to normal. I nodded, sitting back down, my hands fidgeting. The silence wasn't awkward, but it was full, like we were both holding on to something we weren't ready to name. I thought about Josh, about how he'd laugh if he knew I was sitting here, my head spinning over his mom. I thought about Sabrina's ex, the guy who'd let her go, who hadn't seen her the way I did now. I thought about the wind, the way it had blown through that window and changed everything in a second. She wasn't just Josh's mom anymore, not to me. She was Sabrina, warm, real, carrying a quiet strength I hadn't noticed until today. I took the glass she handed me, our fingers brushing again, and I felt it, the same current from before, the one that made my chest tight and my thoughts blurry. We didn't say anything else, just sat there, sipping water, the hum of the AC filling the space. But it wasn't just water, wasn't just a kitchen. It was the start of something, and even if I didn't know what I knew, I wasn't ready to walk away from it. I stood in Sabrina's kitchen, the glass of water still in my hand, the weight of her words hanging between us. Nothing has to happen, Luke, but it already feels like something has. Her voice echoed in my head, soft but heavy, like a door left cracked open, daring me to step through. The air was thick, hum of the AC barely cutting through the silence. My heart was still racing, not just from her question, "Do you find me attractive?" or my clumsy admission, but from the way she looked at me like she saw something real in me, something I wasn't even sure I saw in myself. I set the glass down, my hands restless, and glanced at my phone on the counter. "I should probably go," I said, my voice rough like I was trying to convince myself. "Josh might be back soon." It was an excuse, a way to step back from whatever this was before I got in too deep. She was Josh's mom, 43, someone who'd lived a life I couldn't even imagine. I was just a kid in her eyes, right? A 22-year-old who fixed cars and ran errands, barely keeping his life together. Sabrina looked at me, her eyes steady, and stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint lavender in her hair again. She reached out her fingers, wrapping gently around my wrist, stopping me as I reached for my phone. "No one's coming back today," she said, her voice low, not a whisper, but something stronger, like she was making a choice. "Josh is staying at a friend's tonight. It's just us." I froze my breath, catching. Her touch was light but firm, and her eyes didn't waver. The kitchen felt smaller, the walls closer, like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to navigate this, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. "Come outside," she said, letting go of my wrist, but nodding toward the back door. "The air's better out there." I followed her, my sneakers scuffing the floor, my head spinning. The backyard was bathed in late afternoon light, the sun low, casting long shadows from the oak tree. The breeze was picking up again, cooler now, tugging at the fairy lights strung along the fence. Sabrina stood near the bench, her dress the deep blue one, now still modest, but softer in the wind, swaying gently. Her hair, loose from its bun, caught the light strands dancing across her shoulders. She looked like she belonged there, like the wind was part of her, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. We didn't sit this time, just stood a few feet apart, the grass soft underfoot. The silence wasn't awkward, but it was full, like we were both waiting for something to break. She turned to me, her face half lit by the sun, and her eyes held mine, searching like they had in the kitchen. "Would you kiss me if I asked?" she said, her voice steady but soft, like she was testing the air between us. My heart stopped, then started again faster. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I wasn't sure if she was serious, if this was another moment like the fall or the garage, something we could laugh off later. But her eyes weren't laughing. They were open, vulnerable, like she was letting me see her in a way she hadn't before. I swallowed, my throat tight, and nodded just once. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely audible. "I would." She stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of her, the faint brush of her dress against my jeans. She didn't say anything else, just tilted her head slightly, her lips parting. I leaned in slow, like I was moving through water, afraid I'd ruin it. Our lips met, soft, at first tentative, like we were both surprised it was happening. Then it deepened, not rushed, but steady, like a long breath we'd both been holding. Her hand came up, resting lightly on my neck, her fingers warm against my skin. I slid my arm around her waist, pulling her closer, feeling the curve of her against me. The wind picked up, tugging at us, but we didn't move. It was just her, me, and the quiet certainty of that moment. When we pulled back, her eyes were still on mine, her cheeks flushed, but not embarrassed. She didn't smile, didn't laugh it off. She just stood there, her hand still on my neck, mine still on her waist. The world felt different, like the ground had shifted under us. I wanted to say something to make sense of it, but all I could think was how right it felt, how I didn't want it to end. "Sabrina." I started, my voice rough, but she shook her head just slightly, like she didn't need words. Her fingers slid down to my chest, resting there, and I covered her hand with mine, feeling her pulse under my palm. The wind rustled the leaves above the fairy lights, swaying, and for a moment it was like we were the only two people in the world. "We can stop now," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Or we don't, but if we don't, we can't go back." Her eyes searched mine, not scared, but serious, like she was giving me an out, a chance to walk away before this became something bigger. I didn't hesitate. Then I don't want to go back, I said, the words coming out before I could overthink them. They felt truer than anything I'd said in a long time. I didn't know what this was, didn't know how it would work or what it meant for me, for her, for Josh, but I knew I meant it. She nodded, a small smile breaking through, not wide, but real, like she'd been waiting to hear it. She stepped back, her hand slipping from mine, but the distance didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a promise, like we were giving each other space to breathe but not letting go. Come inside, she said, turning toward the house, her dress catching the wind again. It's getting chilly. I followed her, my heart still pounding, my head a mess of thoughts I couldn't sort out. The kitchen was the same counter, same glasses, same hum of the AC, but it felt different now, like we'd crossed a line and we couldn't uncross. I didn't want to. I thought about Josh, about how he'd react if he knew about how I'd always seen Sabrina as his mom, someone untouchable, out of reach. But she wasn't that anymore. She was Sabrina, warm, real, someone who'd let me in, who'd kiss me like it meant something. We sat at the table, not touching, but close, the silence comfortable now. The wind rattled the windows, and I thought about that first gust upstairs, the one that had knocked us over, started all of this. It wasn't just a kiss, wasn't just a moment. It was a beginning. And even if I didn't know where it led, I knew I wanted to find out. The late afternoon sun hung low, painting the backyard in shades of gold and orange. Sabrina and I sat on the wooden bench under the oak tree, its leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The fairy lights along the fence were starting to glow faint against the fading daylight. We hadn't said much since coming back inside after the kiss, after her words, "We can stop now or we don't. But if we don't, we can't go back." I'd meant what I said, that I didn't want to go back, but now sitting here, the weight of it settled in. This wasn't just a moment, it was a choice, one we were still figuring out. Sabrina leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, her hair loose and spilling across my chest. The breeze caught a few strands, brushing them against my skin, and I could smell that faint lavender scent again, the one that had been there since we fell. My arm was around her, not tight but steady, like I was anchoring us both. The air was cooler now, the heat of the day giving way to something softer, and for the first time in hours I felt my pulse slow, like the world was giving us a moment to breathe. She shifted, her hand resting on mine, her fingers tracing small, absent circles on my knuckles. "When I was younger," she said, her voice low, almost lost in the wind, "I loved a boy. He was 19, I was 25. Everyone said it wouldn't work, that he was too young, too reckless. I didn't care." She paused, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was sinking into a haze of pink. "They were right, though. He left, said he needed to find himself. I spent years wondering if I'd been the reckless one." I stayed quiet, letting her words settle. I could feel the weight of them, the way they carried years of hurt, of questions she'd never answered. Her hand tightened slightly on mine, and I squeezed back just enough to let her know I was there. I didn't know what to say, didn't trust myself to say the right thing, but I wanted her to keep talking, to let me in. "I don't tell people that," she said, turning her head to look at me. Her eyes were soft but searching, like she was waiting for me to judge her. "Not even Josh. It's not something you bring up over coffee." She smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips, and I felt a pang in my chest, not pity, but something deeper, like I was seeing her for the first time. "You don't have to hide it," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "Not with me." I meant it more than I'd meant anything in a long time. She wasn't just Josh's mom anymore, wasn't just the woman who'd opened the door an hour ago. She was Sabrina, someone who'd lived, loved, lost, and still carried a quiet strength that made me want to be better, to be someone she could lean on. She looked at me, her eyes holding mine, and nodded. "You're not just Josh's friend anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay with that?" The question hung there, heavy but gentle, like she was giving me another chance to walk away. I didn't hesitate. "I was never just that," I said, my voice steady now. "Not to me." The words felt like a confession, like I was admitting something I'd known since the moment we fell upstairs, since her dress caught on my leg and her eyes locked onto mine. I'd always seen her, even when I told myself I shouldn't. She wasn't just a figure in the background of Josh's life. She was real here now, and I didn't want to let go. Her smile widened, not big, but real, the kind that reached her eyes. She leaned closer, her head resting back on my shoulder, and we sat there, the wind wrapping around us like it was part of the moment. My hand found hers again, our fingers lacing together, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was chasing something I couldn't name. It was just us in this backyard under this sky, and it was enough. Then her phone buzzed, a sharp vibration cutting through the quiet. She pulled it from her pocket, glanced at the screen. Josh's name lit up, and my stomach twisted. Reality came rushing back. Josh, my best friend, the guy who trusted me to come over to hang out, not to whatever this was. Sabrina looked at the phone, then at me, her eyes steady but unreadable. I waited breath, caught, expecting her to answer, to pull away, to remind us both of the lines we'd crossed. "Don't worry," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'll call him back." She set the phone face down on the bench, her hand finding mine again, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, tugging at her hair, and she laughed, a small, free sound that made my chest ache. I wanted to freeze this moment, to keep her here, laughing close, real. We didn't talk about Josh or what he'd think or what came next. We didn't need to, not yet. The sun was almost gone now, the sky a deep purple, the fairy lights glowing brighter. I thought about the wind that had started all this, the gust that knocked us over, that opened a window I hadn't known was stuck. I thought about her story, the boy who'd left her, the years she'd carried that alone. I thought about my own life, 22. No real plan, just a guy who fixed cars and helped neighbors, never thinking I'd end up here with her. "Sabrina," I said, my voice low, almost lost in the breeze. "I don't know what this is, but I know I don't want it to stop." It wasn't a grand declaration, wasn't poetry, but it was true, and that's all I had. She didn't answer with words, just leaned closer, her head resting against my chest now, her hair tickling my chin. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her in, and we stayed like that, the world quiet except for the wind and the soft hum of the evening. It wasn't perfect, wasn't a movie ending with music and fireworks. It was better, real messy hours. I thought about the future, about Josh, about the questions we'd have to answer. But right then, none of it mattered. It was just Sabrina, me, and the wind that had changed everything. Some winds knock things over, others open windows you never thought would move. This one had done both, and I wasn't going back to the way things were before. In the warm San Diego afternoon, amidst a gust of wind and a tangled fall, Luke's unexpected encounter with Sabrina, his best friend's mother, unveiled a profound lesson about the courage to embrace vulnerability and the beauty of authentic connection. What began as a routine visit to Josh's house spiraled into a series of charged moments, a stumbled fall, a shared kiss, a quiet confession that stripped away pretense and revealed raw truths. Sabrina's bold question, "Do you find me attractive?" and her story of a past love exposed her guarded heart, while Luke's honest response, "I don't want it to stop," marked his willingness to step into the unknown, despite the complexities of their age gap and his friendship with Josh. Their connection, sparked by a gust that knocked them over, taught Luke that life's most meaningful moments often arise in the messiness of chance, where honesty and presence outweigh fear of judgment. It's a reminder that love and connection don't follow neat rules. They thrive when we dare to see and be seen flaws, and all in the fleeting moments that change everything. This story invites us to reflect on times we've faced unexpected choices where vulnerability led to something real. Have you ever felt a moment shift your perspective, pushing you to embrace a truth you hadn't planned for? Share your experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear how you've navigated life's unexpected wins. If this tale moved you, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more stories that capture the heart of human connection. Let's keep exploring these raw, real moments together. Your voice matters.